Welcome to today's webinar, The Human Side of Leadership, Managing People and Ourselves, featuring Drs. Deb Clements, Randy Pearson, and Lou Edgy, in a panel discussion led by our panelist coach, Dr. Tanya Kaler. This is the fourth in a series of 5 webinars in the STFM GME Leadership Panel Series, Stages of GME Leadership from Idealism to Sustainability. This series features accessible, real-time conversations with seasoned GME leaders who have built meaningful and sustainable careers in academic family medicine. Each session focuses on a key leadership challenge, offering practical strategies, candid reflections, and an interactive Q&A session to help current and aspiring leaders thrive. The last webinar in our series, Defining Success on Your Own Terms, will air on Wednesday, May 13th. To register for this webinar or investigate the other webinars in this series, please visit stfm.org/GME-webinars. During this discussion, please utilize the Q&A feature to ask questions of the panelists. Although you may ask questions at any time, designated time has been set aside to answer your questions toward the end of the presentation. And now, Dr. Kaler will begin today's discussion.
Thank you, Jenny. Thank you, panelists, and thank you all who are tuning in or watching on the webinar. I'm Tanya Kaler. I'm a family physician up in Anchorage, Alaska, and it is my privilege to moderate this esteemed panel of very experienced, knowledgeable GME leaders in family medicine. And so before we get started, I thought it might be useful to talk about the term management and what we mean. People management sometimes can confer the notion of controlling or manipulating people. And for our webinar, that's of course not what we're speaking to. We're really speaking to the human side of leadership, that those navigational interactions of the dynamics and the conversations and the feedback and the decisions that affect people, that leaders do with and for their people to create an environment such that everybody can do their best work to serve those who we serve. And so, as you all are thinking, I'd love for you to point your mind toward your own situations in which managing people is at the forefront for you right now, and think about what insights you might hope to walk away from this webinar with. And now I'm going to turn it over to our esteemed panel. And I'd like each one of you to go ahead and introduce yourselves. Let us know about your experience in leadership. And if you'll give us one word or phrase that you attribute, at least in part, to your longevity in this academic leadership positions that you've had. Dr. Randy Pearson, why don't we start with you?
All right. Thank you, Tanya. My name is Randy Pearson. I'm a professor in the Department of Family Medicine at Michigan State University. I've been on faculty at Michigan State for almost 40 years. And my entire career, I've been involved with graduate medical education. So I've been a residency faculty person, a program director, sports medicine fellowship director, assistant dean for graduate medical education and DIO at Michigan State. But currently, I'm just a core faculty member in the University of Michigan Health Sparrow Michigan State University Family Medicine residency. It's like one of the longest names of any residency in the country, but that's located here in Lansing, Michigan. And I think my word really is unflappable. I kind of waver between unflappable and flying under the radar because I think they're both really important. My sense is that, at least for my position, being a good leader involves not being so much in the forefront, but being there for people when they need you. And so flying under the radar, I think, is a good phrase to go by.
Great. Okay.
I forgot. I'm also a consultant with the American Academy of Family Physicians Residency Program Solutions, and I'm serving, like most of our panel, I think, on the STFM Competency-Based Medical Education Task Force.
Thank you, Randy. Okay, so you're special. You'll get 2 words or phrases, so unflappable
Okay.
and flying under the radar. Dr. Lou Edgy, I'm wondering if you would share yours and introduce yourself to us.
Absolutely. So I am a 57-year-old Black female. I was born firstborn, so that's, I think, sometimes something that is leadership worthy. But I was born in Iowa and then spent 14 years in Africa, went to British schools there and was a prefect, so another leadership role in that space. I basically did my residency, my medical school here at University of Michigan, and then went to Toledo for residency where I was chief resident. And I've really had two different attending careers. My first one was in private practice and hospital leadership, and I did that for 13 years. I was a department chair, a chief of staff, peer review chair, credentials chair. But I felt like I wasn't growing in my leadership space. So in 2011, I pivoted back to my old residency program in another health system. And I was program director for 8 years. It just so happened that one of my former program directors was now my faculty. So I decided to get a master's in health professions education so I could do some legit faculty development for them. So I used that MHPE degree to transition into academic medicine, a new language, a new network, became a designated institutional official for 5 years, and then was recruited back here to Michigan. I'm currently the Vice Dean of Medical Education, responsible for our education mission, overseeing the education of 2,400 medical students, residents, and fellows, and the continuing medical education of 3,500 faculty, plus the Ann Arbor VA. If I were to say, my job description really is 3 A's. The first one is accreditation across the full spectrum of medical education. The second is advocacy for human and material resources, as well as physical and psychological safety for our learners. And the last one is advancement, just making sure that we're moving our learners from one stage of training to the next with fidelity and as little bias as possible. My word would be adaptability and growth mindset. And my phrase would be, on matters of style, swim with the tide. On matters of principle, stand like a rock.
That's powerful. Wow. Thank you, Lou. So good. And such great experience in the room. Dr. Deb Clements, how about you?
Thanks, Tanya. That was awesome. You too, Randy. I'm Deb Clements. I have my current position as chair of family and community medicine at Northwestern in Chicago, where I've been for now. I'm in my 15th year in this role, which is just astonishing to me. Much like Randy, my whole career has been in academic family medicine. I started off right out of residency as the division director for medical education for the AAFP, which gave me a 30,000-foot view of organized medicine, what the impact that has on our careers, and really how we can lean into the organizations that we belong to help propel both the discipline of family medicine, but also medicine writ large. So I've always worked with learners. It's been a really fantastic opportunity. I've started 2 residency programs from the ground up, and one was a nascent program that was about 2 years in when I took control of that. And so understand what it is to start a program from scratch. And I think in terms of lifelong learning, throughout my more than 30 years now in family medicine, I've done a fellowship in integrative medicine. I did one in bioethics. I did a health policy fellowship. And then I sat for the first healthcare administration leadership and management certificate last year when that was offered. And I just think it's important to keep growing and keep developing new skills in the sense of being in the perennial generation, as many of you heard at RLS last week. So my word, I would describe it as generativity, the ability to see our impact, not just in the work we do, but in the work that others do as we continue to grow the next generation of learners and leaders in our specialty.
So good. I'm just standing back and watching and listening and thinking, even in introductions, you all are dropping like wisdom pearls, like left and right. And just thank you all. So such good lessons already. And so before we dive into the questions, I'm hoping each one of you might tell a short example that highlights the people navigating challenges that come with your roles. And so, Dr. Lou Edgy, if you're okay, I'll go by first names. I think we talked about that. Yeah.
Fine.
Okay. Lou, why don't you go ahead and get us started?
So I guess, are we doing our our half story?
Yeah, you
Or are
can
we
share the
good?
full story, or you can
Okay.
tell the half story and save
All
some.
right. So, yep. So, as I mentioned before, I was a program director for 8 years. At that time, at the end of the 8 years, our health system pretty much decided that it was too expensive to train residents, and they would start closing programs. And so they started closing residency programs. At that time, I had 18 residents, I had staff and faculty, totally 62 people that I was responsible for. So I will circle back because that actually was a challenge and an opportunity that we'll tell the rest of the story later.
Yeah, talk about the human side of leadership. I'm really looking forward to hearing how that unfolded. Deb, why don't we go to you next?
Sure. And this was really tough, Tanya, to think about this because there are so many opportunities to talk about managing people and managing our own emotions. And so I wanted to sort of stay away from anything that might implicate individuals who would recognize themselves on this conversation. And it's hard because so much of what we do is so personal. Um, I'll share a story that may be common to many of you. We had and it's a smaller story than Lou's. I'm not going to talk about the whole system. We had a preceptor who beloved by the residents, absolutely beloved, and suddenly wasn't performing the way that we would have expected. And the impact on both that person's reputation, but also the learning environment was pretty palpable. And I think we often avoid giving difficult feedback in the interest of preserving the relationship. But it came to the point where I really had to step into the space and give feedback because, as my dean once said, the longer you wait, the more people will think you don't care. And so, is it protecting that relationship with that individual, or protecting the integrity of the entire group that I'm working with, the entire team? And so we entered into that difficult space, and so with my closure, I'll kind of walk through the process that I used and what I discovered as a result.
Yeah. All right. Thank you for sharing that, Deb. Wow. Powerful words from your dean. All right, Randy.
So I'll tell you a little story of an occurrence that happened when I was the DIO. And this actually is a non-family medicine problem. So I'm taking it totally away from us.
Nice.
I think that we have the unfortunate habit sometimes in medicine to kick the can down the road. That when we see a learner, we will see that I only have them for a short time, and then it'll be somebody else's problem. But there was a learner in another residency who actually had repeated issues throughout medical school and residency. And finally, I just said, we can't kick this can any further. And so I ended up bringing the resident into my office, and we had a long discussion, and actually worked with the program director to try and facilitate behavioral change in this person that should have happened a long time previously in his medical education. But I felt happy that we actually were able to give that person some help.
Yeah. Wow. Thank you. I can't wait to get to the rest of the story. So I'll be mindful of time to make sure that we get some closure. And just hearing all of your stories, really the courage that it took each of you, and we'll get to hear more about Lou's, but like I can imagine that. So let's jump into some questions. My favorite question of all time has to do with mindset. And I think that is because so many leadership courses neglects to highlight it, and it makes such a big difference. And I can only imagine all of the different shifts that you all have had over the years on how you view things. But I'm hoping that each one of you would share at least one mindset shift or one way of looking at things that has helped you navigate the people part of your jobs. And Deb, why don't we start with you this time?
Oh, thanks. There's a phrase that I like to use, and I use this with patients all the time. Um, Pretend that 100 hungry tigers are chasing you. What would you do? You would stop pretending because your brain doesn't know the difference between a real threat and a perceived threat. And especially in conversations and situations that are fraught, managing our minds around that is so critical. Reminding ourselves that, emotions are like colors, they just are. And if you lean into those and just let them pass about 90 seconds, you can alleviate yourself of the anxiety that goes along with that and stop rehearsing drama and what ifs, because again, our bodies respond as if it's real. And so try and stay grounded in what are the facts. Understand I have an emotion about that, but I can control how I respond. And so I think that's where managing your mind really is absolutely critical.
So good. Drawing that mindset right into the emotional and then not allowing that reaction to happen. Thank you for that. Randy, how about you?
So, I guess being a guy, sometimes it's hard for me to embrace my feelings. That's sort of a normal thing. But I think that I learned very early on that really being a family physician involves being in touch with your personal self. And I think the quote that comes to mind is nobody cares how much you know until they know how much you care. And really, as a family physician educator, allowing myself to care about my learners and about my colleagues actually really opens the door to having great relationships with them.
I love that. So kind of changing how you think about allowing emotions and being like in that human relationship piece, that connecting piece. Um,
Exactly.
I love it. Great. Lou.
Yeah, thank you. One of my favorite books, actually, the one I read most recently, is called Anxiety at Work by Adrian Gostick and Chester Elton. And it actually goes through 8 different strategies to handle anxiety at work. I think I'll just list the 8 strategies just so you know what those are. But leading through uncertainty, boy, have we been leading through uncertainty in these past several years here. I think what ends up filling the gap in knowledge, communication, et cetera, is anxiety. And so trying to make sure that we're being as transparent as we possibly can with what we're doing to help in these situations is important. Managing overload. I think there's been a large creep in job descriptions over time. And so just keeping a really good eye on how jobs are changing and making sure that we're reflecting the value in our individuals as we go through. Charting career development. I think there's a lot of anxiety when people are not just thinking about what's going on at work, but how is what's going on at work affecting my career, my life. So making sure that when I do my annual evaluations, I actually go ahead and legitimately ask, like, what are your career goals? And being supportive, even if it means that I'm supporting them out of their current role. This is about them and understanding, I'd call them the social determinants of leadership, which would be that there are other things that this person has in their life apart from the job that they have intersecting with me. And so knowing that. The fourth one is moving past perfectionism, and that's just really trying to understand that sometimes 95% is enough, and what does that look like? Articulating that for the team. Managing healthy debate, I think being a role model of 360-degree feedback. If you are doing your own feedback and asking for that, they're much more likely to have a safer space. Being an ally and speaking up, building social connection, certainly being mindful of FOMO. Who didn't hear this? Who didn't get the message? Who feels left out? And then, of course, building confidence with gratitude.
Yeah, gosh, such a rich, but one of the themes that comes across all three of you is that connection, the connection to your emotion, the connection to the people that you're serving and supporting and leading. And so kind of, we've got some ideas of how you view these people situations. And now I'm curious, and some of you have alluded to it a little bit, like what are the skill sets that you invested in that you would recommend others invest in, or even if it was a natural skill that you have that others could invest in that it's really served you well? Just share one of those. And Randy, why don't you start us off?
So I think the big thing for me is compassion. That by putting myself in the other person's shoes, that actually helps me to understand
Mm.
what's going on. And and again, as I said earlier, not being afraid to express my own emotions, to not to have your emotions take over, but also understand that emotions play a very important role in any relationship between me and the people that I work with.
Okay, great. Thank you. So the skill of compassion, I love that you call that a skill because it really is. I haven't thought of that before like that. Um, and Lou, back to you.
Yeah, so humility would be the one for me. Number one, you can't receive feedback without humility. You can't walk into certain spaces that are challenging without humility. I am actually tomorrow morning doing urology grand rounds on precision feedback,
Mm.
managing the gap between direct supervision and surgical entrustability. And for me to walk into the room with surgeons as a non-surgeon, I come with humility, but I also come with a degree in medical education. And so we'll be going over that. So I think humility is one thing. Another recent example is that when I did my Family Medicine Review Committee update at RLS just last week, what we usually do is we meet with the AFMRD board a couple days prior, and getting feedback from them is always useful. They're a brilliant group of people. And I was able to incorporate that feedback into my presentation to the 1,500 people, and it went well. And so again, if I had not been receptive to feedback, coming to them with humility, then certainly 1,500 people would have had a different experience.
So good. Love that. Thank you. Deb?
So I'll reflect on this a little differently. I think recognizing that health systems and organizations have changed dramatically since we were trained. I know we may be a little bit different in our years of training here, but generally, medicine was really hierarchical when we were all trained. And it's become so much more of a matrix kind of system. And leadership in a matrix system is very, very different than when you're the boss and everybody knows you're the boss. I think it's important to pay attention to how those roles have changed and be clear on what roles are, making sure that we create environments of psychological safety, and recognize that we're all there for organizational alignment, not necessarily direct line reporting. So having a lot of clarity around other people's perspectives and leaning into that clarity, but then curiosity about where other people are coming from and what I might be missing about their perspective and the demands on their time, what other leaders may be asking them to do that may be in direct conflict with what I'm asking them to do. So they're trying to meet essentially two leaders at the same time with differing perspectives. So, and I guess an awareness of that organizational matrix and the dynamics around that, I think, are critical.
Yeah, so good. Randy?
Yeah, I just wanted to add that we are all leaders for a long time in family medicine education, and you don't get to be a leader for this long if you take a lot of things personally. So I think to remember that when there are problems that come up, it's not about me. It's very rarely about me. If there were problems with me, they would have come up a long time ago. And so by sort of making it a little bit understanding that there are problems and they're not personal, really helps you to address the problems in a really forthright manner.
Yeah. So good because really you're highlighting some skills. If I were to put them in one bucket, I would probably put them in the bucket of emotional intelligence. But there's that piece of the skill of compassion, developing that, the skill of humility, the skill of taking feedback with humility, right? And the skill of really understanding this interesting time where for many of us, this matrix is kind of new and a new way of approaching it. And so I love that you all highlight those as skills because I don't know before today if I would have thought of it that way. So thank you. I want to make sure that we get to so many listeners want like tangible, like, okay, yeah, I've got a mindset, I need to connect with my emotions. But what do you do on a day-to-day basis to do this work well in managing people? And so now I'm all confused because the room's changed on my screen a bit, but I think, Deb, we're up to you.
Oh, that's such a hard question, Tanya. Lou said something that made me think about the difference between courage and confidence, right? Courage precedes confidence 100% of the time. I mean, none of us were comfortable the first time we had to do a medical procedure, right? None of us jumped in and said, I'm confident doing a chest tube, right? You had to have the courage to do that. And leadership is the same. I would like to say there are 100 people outside waiting for my job. There's not.
Mhm.
There's not. Leadership is a lonely, hard job. And you just have to develop some courage to get in there and do it. To Randy's point, knowing we're going to do things wrong some of the time, acknowledging our mistakes, moving on, making better mistakes the next day, hopefully not making the same mistakes over and over. Um, I don't know that there's a playbook for it. I think you just have to surround yourself with people who, I think Reed Tuxen said this last week, your kitchen cabinet, right? People who are willing to help you face the hard things, give you suggestions about how you might move forward, mentor you, coach you. But nobody has all the answers. It's just jumping in and doing the very best you can with humility, asking for forgiveness when you make a mistake, and trying to do a better job after that.
Oh, so good. Thank you so much. So many wise words there, Deb. Brandy.
I think that it's really important, even when you get into the upper levels of leadership. As Deb said, when you put in your first chest tube, you did it not because you knew how to do it, but because you knew that you had support behind you. And I think that sometimes we forget when we are in upper leadership roles that there is always someone else. That it's very, very rare in this life when you have to do something by yourself. And I think that, as Deb said, surrounding yourself with good people and understanding when you need a lifeline, and then who you can go to have that lifeline thrown to you, I think is extremely important.
Another great, highlighting the importance of that. Lou, practical strategies for you.
Yeah. So I think one of the most important things that I've learned over the years is to manage my energy. For years, I thought I was a night owl. And then, light went off, and I thought, if I get enough sleep at night, maybe I actually am a morning person. So I flipped the script and started going to bed at 8:30, 9 o'clock, and I get to work at 5 a.m. I found that between 5 and 11, I can get 2 hours of work done per hour. And that makes a huge difference for me. It also I'm here in the C-suite as vice dean. And so between 5 a.m. and 6 a.m., there is a whole nother network up here that if I came in at 6 a.m., they're already off, evaporated into their days. And so it is just made sure that my 200 emails per day are already done, that my box is empty, that people have access to me. I'm able to get to my meetings. That really made a huge difference for me.
Wow, so good. So the practical, go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say, Lou, you have to be careful though, because at 6 o'clock in the morning, most of the people that are there are surgeons. So you have to keep that in
that
mind.
is true. Our CEO is a urologist, but our dean is a cardiologist.
No, I love it. So a lot of good practical strategies, really, that you highlight, and I think that kind of normalizing for yourself and others. This job is challenging. You'd mentioned sometimes can feel lonely. You mentioned, flipping the script and deciding you're no longer a night owl. You're now an early bird, right? Like, and just hearing those as practical strategies, I think is going to be very useful going forward. And I think you're already kind of went on to my next topic, because I think it's so incredibly important, is we're talking about people, and none of you have gotten to where you are alone. And so I'd love to really talk about your sounding boards. How did you find them? How did you cultivate the relationship? How do you use them? And how have they shaped you over these years to be able to manage people well? Lou, why don't we start with you?
Yeah, absolutely. So, hands down, Monica Lipson, who's an internist, she's the vice dean at Columbia. She and I met in 2014 when I started my master's program in health professions education. And the requirement was for us to meet every 2 weeks, regardless. And we did that over 2.5 years and developed this really strong bond. She holds confidences. She is an amazing leader. I mean, her out of office sign has education in it. This you could get CME from her out of office messages. She's really remarkable, and she's unwavering in her support. When I got my professorship, she flew in for the afternoon from DC, made her comments, and had to fly out. She squeezed it between two other meetings in another space, in another state. It was that kind of support. So, again, she is an internist. Us being family docs, as having been a DIO in the past, I've developed a lot of relationships across multiple specialties. And I think as family docs, we are leaders who are trained to collaborate and engage, and we use that in our leadership as well.
I love that. Deb.
Oh, I'd love to name people, but at the risk of leaving people out, I'm not going to, because there have been so many mentors across my career that have been willing to invest themselves into me. And I think recognizing that, both acknowledging that with those individuals, even though they don't expect it, and paying it forward has been huge. The piece that I think has helped, even as I've become more senior and many of my mentors are now retired, is being willing to be vulnerable with the situations that we face. And so, people can be mentors for just a small piece of what's happening, or they can be there for your entire career, and they are equally as valuable. Um, I think just when you believe that you've seen everything, you
Yeah.
haven't. You haven't. Things come up all the time that we were not trained for. We couldn't have imagined. And so having people that will say, well, this might be how I would handle it. I don't know your life. This is what you might think about, but get back in there. Get back in there and do it. Many of you know Northwestern's funding was frozen for the last year, which presented all kinds of issues for us as leaders, and we had no answers. And I really wanted to shirk from my responsibility of communicating that because I didn't have the answers and wasn't going to anytime soon. And I will name a name, Val Gilchrist. I talked to her and said, it makes me feel like I want to leave my job because I don't know what to do. And she said, it doesn't matter. Get back in there and tell them you don't know what to do. Share that you don't have the answers. They'll respect that. And she was spot on, spot on. But I think we need to rely on other people to, again, give us that energy, that motivation when we don't have it.
That's so good. Randy.
So I'm going to disclose this to you all. I have the personality type INFJ. I am a card-carrying introvert. And actually, my daughter gave me a little sign that's up on the wall that says, "Introverts unite separately in your own homes." So, uh, I'm looking way back when I was a first-year resident, and our program director actually called me into his office, and he told me that I needed to step up my game because they almost didn't put me on their rank list when I interviewed for residency. Now that's a wake-up call. So I decided at that time that I was going to change my game, and I actually became chief resident, and then went to go on to be a faculty member. And I've actually been teaching family medicine board review course before hundreds of people on the stage. So I think that the bottom line for me is that sometimes you can't change the way you're built, but you can overcome things.
I love that. And at the encouragement of somebody who was willing to say the hard things, right, too.
Right,
So
that's
good.
right. That's right.
And I heard Lou and Deb the intentionality that it took, like that commitment to every 2 weeks and reaching out and recognizing when you need help and talking with them and being vulnerable. And I just thank you for normalizing the fact that that sense of, oh my gosh, I need to quit sometimes raises its head. And it doesn't mean you're not in the right spot, right? Sometimes it means you need to talk to your sounding board, right? And so I think
Right.
that's really powerful. Let's see, am I back? All right.
Oh yeah, you're there. So
Okay.
I was just going to say that if you I take a step back and I say, what's the worst thing that could happen if I do this? And most of the time, the worst thing that could happen is not that bad. And so sometimes you just have to take a little leap of faith and jump into the deep end of the pool and understand that when you do that, there's generally a lifeguard there for you too. So
I love that. You're bringing back the courage and the having people around to help in one metaphor. Thank you.
exactly.
Okay, I want to make sure that we save time to cover the rest of each of your stories. And before we get there, I want to remind those of you who are in the webinar to go ahead and put your questions in the Q&A box. I know the chat is disabled, but if you can go ahead and start putting your questions, because I'm sure that there is a lot of insights that you want to pick their brain about. So go ahead, feel free, and we'll get to those in just a couple of minutes. Who wants to finish out their story that you prefaced in the beginning? Yeah, go ahead, Lou.
Okay, so I think we left off where my health system decided they were closing all the residencies. And so one thing that I pointed out was that we were a primary care shortage area and that didn't make a lot of sense. But I had been chief of staff at a health system before I transferred into the residency. And I said, you know what, I've got a great relationship with the CEO. I had been chief of staff at the same time he was CEO. Let's write a new program application and we can transfer all 62 people. And so we did exactly that. We had a drone that was watching the building of our new FMP and all these things. And essentially we transferred, we did all of our recruiting at nights and weekends so that we weren't stealing from one time from one institution for another. And June 30th, we were one program. July 1st, we were another program in another institution. And we invited all the graduates, all the alum from the program that have been around since 1974. And so that the new folks could see the legacy of the program that they were sort of inheriting. And so it went very well, but it was really a matter of I was the only one who knew the other health system. So I was the thin bridge between one space of uncertainty for them. And we were able to go ahead and move them over. So it ended well.
How cool is that?
Yeah, it also started me down the path of, just like Deb going ahead and starting new residency programs, became a DIO, started a new sponsor institution that now has additional fellowships and so on. So it gave me additional skills as well.
That is so good. And I love the fact that you might not have seen the connection of one job to the next, but then realizing how that narrow bridge or thin bridge that you put it was really crucial. What Lou would you say was one of your most what about that situation did you take forward? What was the learning point for you?
So it's really a matter of I learned how to break bad news because number one, I had to break the fact that the residency was closing. And so doing that as early as possible is always the most important thing. Doing it with transparency and with care is always important. And being specific about how this change is going to affect each and every person in that room. That was really important. And then that helped to lay a foundation of trust that had everyone walk across that bridge into the other space. We also celebrated small wins, which was, Cotter's 8 steps of change. Get this building coalition. This guiding coalition, but you definitely need to celebrate small wins as you move forward into a new space.
Great lesson. Thank you. Deb, I think you had a little bit of follow-up to yours as well, right?
Sure, I absolutely did. I think about the concepts around feedback. Giving and receiving feedback are still some of the most difficult things that we do. especially when we may have been raised in a different kind of feedback environment, and now the expectations are quite different than what they were. I was sitting next to someone in a session, and she reflected to me that when she was a resident, if you got feedback, it was because you were in trouble. And so she knew not getting feedback
Exactly.
ever was wonderful, right? She said, I got through my entire residency and never got any feedback. Well, that's not where we want to be. And so the principle, I think, of that candor is respect, right? Silence is neglect. We need to solidify that. So in this case, I really adopted, there's a mnemonic, care mnemonic. When you're giving feedback, especially if it's difficult, the C is connect to the mission. So we are both here to have the best program we can to support the residents in their educational endeavor. And I know you're as committed to that mission as I am. A is address the behavior, right? Not the individual, but the behavior. It's been observed that you've shown up 20 to 30 minutes late for precepting, or are leaving early before the residents are finished and precepting on the phone, right? That's the behavior. It's a truth. Nobody can argue with that behavior. And then request their perspective is the R of the care mnemonic. Can you help me understand what's going on here? In this case, there had been a child care change. The preceptor wasn't able to drop her kids off in a way that would ever get her to clinic on time. And same on the back end, she had to leave in order to pick them up. And while she thought that it was going to resolve at some point, it was becoming clear that this was a parameter that wasn't going to change. And she had some difficult decisions to make about how she wanted her career to look. But her perspective was she was doing the very best she could. She was available on the phone. She was trying to meet the objectives and didn't really recognize how it was impacting the residents and how frightened they were that she wasn't physically present at that time, and certainly really regretted it. Then the E is to establish next steps. So can we change schedules? Can we put in a bridge when you're not available? Is there something that you're going to be able to do to change your reality? I will say the resolution of this, we ended up leaving with a pretty good understanding of what the importance was of continuing to support the mission, support the residents, and take responsibility for behavior. The faculty member took another position because it just wasn't possible to modify our circumstances to meet the circumstances that she needed at this point in her life. But it was fine because she's happy. We'd welcome her back. We just know this wasn't the right opportunity at that time. And I think the residents also understood that because we treated this with compassion rather than just demanding you must do this at this point, right? That we were willing to work with anybody on anything. And it opened that opportunity for others later on to not be afraid of, again, demonstrating that vulnerability and saying, can you work with me?
Yes, so good. I love that mnemonic. And so thank you for sharing that. And it's such a powerful story of compassion and courage to say what needs to be said. And so they're not mutually exclusive, and just kind of highlighting that. And that situation fits so many that we all experience. Somebody's below the line, so to speak, and we can understand why. And they're still below the line. And so we have to figure out what's the next step forward. So, so good. Randy, I know your story sounded more complete, but I want to give you the opportunity if there's some other things that you wanted to say about it or anything else.
Yeah, I think that this whole concept of kicking the can down the road, and there are a lot of reasons why that happens in medicine, in life in general. I think that oftentimes it's because we're a little afraid of addressing the problem. And in this case, I think that this resident turns out just wanted to be heard. And so I think developing not just the skill of listening, but the skill of making the other individual feel like they have been heard. is really, really important. In how to advance those individuals' careers. And so, he ended up finishing the residency program, mainly because everybody took a step back and then realized that, listening to people is not just having your ear open; it is actually making sure that people understand that you heard them.
So good. And so that compassion, and confronting and courage, and also kind of one of the things that you're alluding to is recognizing that the behavior that we see, there may be some internal things going on with that person that we don't yet understand, and so giving them a chance to speak to that. And then, wow, I mean, like, what a great example of helping support that resident in completing successfully their program. And so I want to turn to the questions and answers. And I know that, Lou, you've already answered one. And so I'm just going to read it for the webinar recording. Is what an incredible panel. I want to watch again and again. Small chunks that I can take away, admire the confidence building tools, vulnerability, and humility. And so this is exactly how I'm thinking. I was kind of taking notes as you were all speaking, and I'm like, I'm going to have to go watch this back. You all there was like so many pearls that you dropped they're impactful. They're not just nice sayings. They're hugely important. And so as I'm going to give everybody attending a chance to write any more questions, you have this unique opportunity to pick the brains of 3 very talented, experienced academic medicine leaders in family medicine. So don't waste the opportunity. If you have questions, put them in. Yeah, Deb, go ahead.
Yeah, Tanya, I wanted to touch on something that we've sort of skirted around, and that's the tendency that we all have to make inferences. And so I would encourage people to really be cautious around seeing a behavior and then inferring what that behavior means. But really being specific, asking questions, being explicit, being curious. Because I would venture to guess 80% of the time I make an inference, I am completely wrong. I have no idea what's going on with somebody else unless I ask, right? And also being explicit about my own expectations, right? Just because you watched me do something doesn't mean you know how to do it. And so being explicit about what went into my process, my decision making, even if it doesn't agree with what you think should have happened. I think that will bring us a long ways towards resolving some misunderstandings.
Such a good point. The inferences and just stepping back and taking a point. And I also can verify how the number of times that I assume something from behavior, the vast majority of time, I'm not correct. And that's why I love a coaching approach to working with our learners, whether it's feedback or teaching or, advising. That coaching approach allows us to really create a space for them to express what's going on to the point they still feel safe to do so. And so thank you for highlighting that. We have one question here. This is definitely for Dr. Edgy. What leverage did the MHPE offer you in leadership and being included at the table?
Thank you for that excellent question. As I mentioned, it was the bridge for me, and it offered me 2 different things. Number one, an entirely different vocabulary that allowed me to interact with a completely different network as well, with some credibility. So, for example, we had to know the difference between assessment and evaluation, and that there are 4 different program evaluation methods that are the basic ones. Those types of things that changed the things that I can offer in other spaces. So I'm currently on the Common Program Requirements Task Force for the ACGME as well, which helps me to be able to go ahead through our assessment portion of our milestones and so forth, what and bring the right language into those spaces. Because as you know, the ACG document has evaluation all over it. That is incorrect in the medical education literature. So that's one thing. The network has been unbelievable. Just people to publish with, people I have been able to collaborate with in projects and so forth.
Great. Thank you. And I don't know if you all are seeing it, but you're getting some love in the Q&A for sharing all of your helpful tips, and not just helpful in medical education, but also in any leadership. And I think we have answered that. So good. I'm not seeing any other questions. So while we're waiting for that, are there other points that any of you feel like you'd like to flesh out a little bit more?
Yeah, I think that you asked a question in our prep about recruitment. You know, what kind of strategies do we use for recruitment of faculty and for turnover in key positions?
Mm-hmm.
I spent 30 years as team physician for Michigan State's football team, so I learned about how the athletic department works, and I learned that athletic directors actually keep a little index card in their drawer with potential head coaches, so that if a coach happens to leave, they would have a list of people to go to. And I think that the true statement is that recruitment in our business happens every day. And so it happens through the networking that we do. So if we're at RLS, not to say that I was out there recruiting people's faculty away, but your conversations can tell you if people are looking for a change. And as we all know, we do a lot of recruitment from within. So I remember one of our faculty who actually was a medical student at Michigan State and rotated with us. And then I thought, wow, you'd be a really good resident. So we recruited him for residency, and he came to our residency program. And then I said, you should think about being a faculty member. And he said, no, I really want to go out into practice. So he did. He went out into practice here in Lansing. And then lo and behold, a couple of years ago, his practice closed. And so I reached out to him and I said, remember when we talked about being faculty? Have you thought about that at all? And he said, as a matter of fact. And so now he's back on faculty. So, recruitment can take a long time, but you should always keep those little lists of people that, might come in handy as you're looking for open positions later on.
That's a great story. And Lou, I know you had something to add, and I want to real quick. There's an anonymous attendee who said, Dr. Clements, how did Northwestern do with the budget crisis? We continue to have financial crises at our institution, and we continue to get asked more for less, and it has increased resident dissatisfaction and morale. So I'll open that up to all of you, but specifically they're wondering how Northwestern is faring.
That's a tough question to answer. Did we lose some positions? We did. We lost positions. I think managing the crisis around that and having very clear guidelines on what went and what didn't, and who was giving up what and why, and being transparent about those things. We modeled out several different kinds of reductions. And while it was not the chair's decision, which one we landed on, it was the board's decision. We at least understood the process, and we were able to communicate with clarity and transparency why we got to where we were. I think the model of just expecting more of people in their current roles is not sustainable. We can do that for a small period of time because we're all dedicated to what we do, but we have to understand the why behind it, and we have to understand what measures are being taken to alleviate that. We all did it during COVID, but it was time limited. And so my heart goes out to you, anonymous attendee. It's a tough situation to be in, but as a leader, I would pursue what are the endpoints, what's the clarity around this, and how can I help my team understand this is not an unending situation, that there are measures in place that are going to make this better.
Great. Lou?
So,
Oh, sorry, she had her hand up.
Yes, I was just going to answer the additional question. If you answering this one, go right ahead.
Yeah, I actually would like to comment a little bit on that. Yeah, and I think that n- it's amazing to me, having been in medical education for 40 years, how little the C-suite actually knows about medical education funding. And every time there's a turnover, we have to actually explain how we're funded. So I would say when we're facing budget crunches, that knowledge is power and understanding how we are funded. So all of the CMS funding, DGME and IME, those pots of money. If you've not gone to RLS, going to the sessions on funding is important. And then understanding that the last Merritt Hawkins survey of downstream revenue shows that every FTE family physician generates about $2.3 million per year in downstream revenue. All of that knowledge actually helps us defend ourselves because we know family medicine education is one of the most expensive graduate programs to run. So I would say fill yourself up with knowledge about where we're at and speak from that knowledge.
And I'll just
Get
add
family docs in the
briefly.
suite.
That's right. I'll add briefly.
So
Don't wait for a crisis to demonstrate your value. Shameless self-promotion every single year at a minimum. Come up with an infographic that demonstrates the value of your program that you can put in the hand of your C-suite. No.
And just answering the question, that's the last one there. After attending ACGME last month, one of my takeaways was to normalize remediation. How do we introduce this? How do you introduce this in your residency programs? I was on the writing group for the requirements that were for family medicine in 23. And one of the things that we did with the individualized learning plans was try to normalize learner specific curricula. And I think that probably was one of the most important things to start the process. We're also in the era of CBME, so competency-based medical education. And here at Michigan, we're actually starting a time variability component of it in our OB program. So each learner will have a precision set of learning metrics, and they will be moved along at the pace at which the pace of competency. And so they can graduate in OB up to 6 months earlier than their designated fixed time to graduate. And so, again, I think it's just going to be an overall cultural change across the nation. We've had 4 CBME ABMS meetings so far, and they've been focusing on competency-based medical education. We're moving in the direction really, really slowly where it'll be individualized and become more normal.
Thank you. Randy?
Yeah, I would like to applaud the committee that Lou has been working on because this concept of the individualized learning plan really has normalized what we look at as what should be each individual resident's pathway towards competency, and so by removing the name uh, remediation and substituting an individualized learning plan that every resident has. We have now made this the norm rather than having the stigma of, or as a couple of our residents said, the target on their back when they were in remediation. So, rather than calling it remediation, make sure that their individualized learning plan actually is individual for that person.
So good. And I want to make sure that we highlight our last webinar in the series is going to be hosted by physician educator, coach, leader, Dr. Santina Wheat. And she will have Dr. Jim Schindler, Dr. Olivia Ray Wright, and Dr. Tricia Elliott. And that will be defining success on your own terms, having to do a lot with your own identity as it develops over the years. And if you want to watch the last ones that you missed, let me tell you what you've missed if you didn't see them. Balancing strategic priorities with day-to-day fires, navigating institutional realities, and sustaining yourself. And so I want to thank you all, to our panelists, like so much wisdom packed in such a short place. But family medicine educators and those of you who have led for years are just really special, wonderful people. And I know that you all give back on a regular basis. And thank you for sharing the wisdom that you've learned along the way. Any closing remarks?
Thank you, Tanya, for being such a great moderator, friend, and colleague.
Thank you.
And I want to
Yeah.
thank the other panelists as well for all the things that I learned while I was here on this panel.
Yep. Thank you all. It was a pleasure being on this panel.
All right. Well, until next time.